Christina here with Jules Lewin. We're just continuing our videos on vendor finance. Jules, what are the types of vendor finance?
Christina, vendor finance in essence is a transaction where the seller or the vendor provides finance to the purchaser. There are various ways this can be structured. It depends on the needs and requirements of the parties. Traditionally, when you're doing a vendor finance contract for property, it can either be done by an option to purchase the property, which means that the property isn't purchased, but the purchaser has got an option to buy the property, and they pay an option fee upfront to do that. And if and when the option is exercised, that becomes the deposit. Some people have what is called a lease option, when the purchaser or the buyer rents the property and has a lease option. So again, you're paying rental for renting the property, but when you exercise the option to buy the property, it comes off the purchase price. That is the one option. There is an installment sale contract which is used. I don't like it and I don't suggest it because it's far too complicated and difficult to understand, but it is available, and at a consultation more information can be given. There's a very simple way of doing a vendor finance which has been around since 1972, and that's called a terms contract. A terms contract is governed by the Sale of Land Act in Western Australia, and it works like this. Someone sells someone else a property. The purchase price is, say, $300,000. You don't need to have a separate rent agreement, but every month the purchaser pays the seller an amount of money. Part of that money goes to the rent, some money goes towards the purchase price of the property. So after a 2 or 3 or 5 year term, that money comes off the purchase price. Then what would happen is that the purchaser would need to get financed by a certain date from the date of contract, and then settlement would be a month later. The difference between an option and a terms contract: a terms contract is a binding contract. It becomes legally binding from when it's signed, and the purchaser is obligated to sell the property and the buyer is obligated to buy the property. In an option contract, it's an option for the buyer to decide whether or not they want to buy the property. Some people do not like it because there's stamp duty payable, but to me it's the safer option. The other thing which I need to say to you, and I reiterate from my earlier video, when you're going into a relationship with someone to buy a property, you have to be prepared to make sure that they are in it to be able to buy the property, and that when it comes to taking transfer of the property, they will have the capacity and there will be sufficient deposit to purchase the property. Otherwise it's going to land up in tears. So just to summarize, there are various options. These contracts are called different names. They're very different in eastern states. I either use an option to purchase, I buy a lease option, use a lease option, or I use a terms contract. If someone comes to me, those are the 3 ways I do it. I'm not really concerned about other fancy ways of doing it. I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but I like to do it in a way that my clients understand it, because they need to be able to go away and understand it. And the other thing which we do at Chartier Legal with your assistance is we give the client an explanatory memorandum about what a terms contract is and what their duties and obligations are. So if they go away, they can understand what their duties and obligations are.